Hey, and welcome. This is the Ben Shapiro Show. Got a lot coming up for you this hour. In just a little while, we will be getting to Dave Chappelle, who is now finding himself on the chopping block. Dave Chappelle canceled because he said politically incorrect things because he's a comedian, and we can't allow that to happen. That's got to stop. Plus, Alan Greenspan is now pushing for negative interest rates. This is probably not a good idea. You know, having the Federal Reserve be this in charge of the economy, it should scare Republicans, even if you think it helps President Trump. We'll get to that. But first, there is a story out from the Washington Post that should be at least mildly disquieting about what the White House is looking at with regard to gun control. Now, I sort of see the merit of what the White House is doing, and I also see the downside of what the White House is doing. Here is the story, and then we'll decide together. Jacqueline Alamany reporting. The White House is considering new projects seeking links between mental health and violent behavior. According to the Washington Post, the White House has been briefed on a proposal to develop a way to identify early signs of changes in people with mental illness that could lead to violent behavior. Supporters see the plan as a way President Trump could move the ball forward on gun control following recent mass shootings, as efforts seem to be flagging to impose harsher restrictions such as background checks on gun purchases. The proposal is part of a larger initiative to establish a new agency called the Health Advanced Research Projects Agency, or HARPA, which would sit inside the Health and Human Services Department. Its director would be appointed by the president. The agency would have a separate budget, according to three people with knowledge of conversations around the plan. HARPA would be modeled on DARPA, the highly successful Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency that serves as the research arm of the Pentagon and collaborates with other federal agencies, the private sector, and academia. The concept was advanced by the Susan Wright Foundation and first discussed by officials on the Domestic Policy Council and senior White House staffers in June 2017. So basically, the proposal is that we set up a new government agency, and their job is to suss out signs of early mental illness so that we can keep track of people and put red flags on them so they can't buy guns. The problem is, how do you determine what mental illness constitutes, and at what level can you remove guns from people? The Susan Wright Foundation reapproached the administration last week and proposed that HARPA include a safe home, stopping aberrant fatal events by helping overcome mental extremes project. Well, one of the things you got to love about legislation is that everyone has to come up with an insane acronym. I'm very much looking forward to the ultra pneumosilicovolcanoconiosis bill. Maybe there'll just be enough letters to make that happen. Officials discussed the proposal at the White House last week, said two people familiar with the discussions. The attempt to use volunteer data to identify neurobehavioral signs of someone headed toward a violent explosive act would be a 4-year project costing an estimated $40 to $60 million, according to Jeffrey Ling, the lead scientific advisor on HARPA. He says everybody would be a volunteer. We're not inventing new science. We're analyzing it so we can develop new approaches. So they will presumably create algorithms so they can look at the content you post on social media and then see how that lines up with the possibility of doing violence in the future. There are plenty of researchers and mental health experts who believe mental health and gun violence aren't necessarily linked. Mental illness can sometimes be a factor in such violent acts, experts say, but it is rarely a predictor. Most studies show that no more than a quarter of mass shooters have a diagnosed mental illness. More commonly shared attributes include a strong sense of resentment, desire for notoriety, obsession with other shooters, a history of domestic violence, narcissism, and access to firearms. Apparently, Trump has reacted very positively to the HARPA proposal, but it'll be interesting to see if Congress is willing to create a whole new agency behind all of this. It is also unclear how exactly, again, this is implemented. Let's say that HARPA actually creates a breakthrough technology with high specificity and sensitivity for early diagnosis of neuropsychiatric violence. How specific would that study have to be? I mean, after all, when you're talking about mass shooters, you're talking about a tiny, minute, infinitesimal, nearly non-existent percentage of the population on a statistical level. There are 330 million people in the United States. You're talking about a handful of people per year. How exactly do you create an algorithm that sensitive that you're able to weed out the people who are going to use a gun and shoot up a mall from the people who are just saying terrible things on social media, but are not actually going to do all of those things? The document actually lists a number of widely used technologies it suggests could be employed to help collect data. And here's where you get into the controversial provision. They're saying that you could use Apple Watches, Fitbits, Amazon Echo, and Google Home. Now, that's getting creepy. This is starting to look like Minority Report now. So if you're talking about just the data that people volunteer and put up on 4chan or 8chan or Facebook or Twitter, that's one thing. That is your fault for putting that data out there. If we are talking about private data being gathered by your Apple Watch or your Fitbit or your Google Home or Amazon Echo, that's scary stuff. Because the fact is, we all say ridiculous, crazy things in the privacy of our own homes. Do you really want some doctor going through everything that you say and trying to determine if you fit an algorithm so that your gun rights can be removed from you? I mean, that violates absolutely the Fourth Amendment. I mean, that is unreasonable search and seizure of data for sure. And the document also mentions powerful tools collected by healthcare providers like fMRIs, tractography, and image analysis. So this is going to be great. What, the government is going to have the power, presumably, to demand that your functional MRIs are used. Again, functional MRIs, by the way, are pretty inexact. Like, not to mention this for the 1 millionth time, my wife is a doctor. She does study neuropsychiatry. And fMRIs are really, really inexact. They're good at some things, and they are very not good at others. The notion that it can sort of read your brain is just not true. The document says advanced analytical tools based on artificial intelligence and machine learning are rapidly improving and must be applied to the data. Now, people familiar with the project stressed it would not collect sensitive health data about individuals without their permission. So they're saying this is preliminary. But you could certainly see a world where people in government push to start violating the Fourth Amendment in pursuit of exactly this data without your permission. And they say the government is simply trying to identify risk factors when it comes to mental health that could indicate violent behavior. They say privacy must be safeguarded, profiling must be avoided, data protection capabilities will be the cornerstone of this effort. But critics are deeply worried, and I think rightly so, about the power of government in this area. Now, if there's a voluntary study in which there are certain people who volunteer as sort of guinea pigs so that we can develop better algorithms, and then we can use public data about people to utilize those algorithms, then that seems less troublesome to me, and that's presumably what they are doing. Presumably that's what attracts President Trump. But there would be something obviously very scary about setting the precedent that the government, if only they had the capability of accessing your Amazon Echo, could know whether you're a potential shooter or not. How heavy would the political pressure be to violate the Fourth Amendment? That'd be some pretty scary stuff, obviously. Meanwhile, the left continues to exercise political pressure in every direction on gun control. The Washington Post has an absolutely absurd editorial targeting Mitch McConnell, the Senate Majority Leader. It's called "How Many More Names Will Be Added to the List Before Mitch McConnell Acts on Guns?" And again, this is using the same old ridiculous contention that Mitch McConnell must not care about dead people because he doesn't approve the Washington Post pursuits on gun control. The editorial says, it names the individuals who were just killed in Midland and Odessa. It says, add those 7 individuals randomly slaughtered Saturday by a shooter in the West Texas cities of Midland and Odessa to the toll of those lost to America's gun insanity. Again, they were not lost to gun insanity. They were lost to an evil person who had a bunch of red flags. It's not about gun, what does that even mean, gun insanity? It's really absurd. I mean, it really is, because there are millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions of people in America who are gun owners, who have a gun in the house, who are not insane and are not part of the quote-unquote gun insanity. But the Washington Post says, what if there was a mass shooting in the United States, not once or twice or 4 or 6 times monthly, but every single day? A big one, the kind that electrifies social media and squats for days on page 1. Would that be enough to move Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell from his insistent inertia on gun safety? Would any volume of bloodshed convince the Kentucky Republican that Congress faces a moral imperative to act? I gotta say, I am very, very bored with the idea from the media that there is a, quote, moral imperative to act when you do not specify which action would actually have prevented these shootings. They're saying something bad happened in my life. There is a moral imperative to act. A moral imperative to act to do what? Like, shouldn't you actually clarify what is the thing that is the moral imperative to do? And then they talk about how terrible it is that people have been shot. Agree. Then they say the list below, far from comprehensive, is tragic in part because it is so far from inevitable. No single law would end gun violence, but there are reasonable, obvious measures that would help. For example, ban the sale of military-grade assault weapons. Really, would that help? Let's see the studies that show that. Did it really help when there was a ban on quote-unquote assault weapons from 1994 to the early 2000s? Was that something that helped greatly? Because I'm not seeing the evidence for that. But again, the code word for we have no evidence is common sense when it comes to leftist policies. So we need common sense gun control. What they mean by common sense gun control is we like it, but we have no evidence to support it. They say these are unneeded by civilians. Really? An AR-15 is unneeded by a civilian? I feel like I might need an AR-15 to, protect me from a person trying to invade my house with an AR-15. of which there are tens of millions in circulation, by the way. And then this is such puerile writing. They're unneeded by civilians. They are a blight on the nation. Their ready availability a national disgrace. Okay, so thank you for using your thesaurus, but also can you make an argument? They say eliminating them would slow the growth of this list. Would it though? I mean, really? Like, do you have any evidence of that whatsoever? Eliminating the sale? Or are you all also for a full-scale gun confiscation? Is that the goal here? Because that's what Beto O'Rourke seems to want. So, again, the political pressure has nothing to do with reality or workable policy. It has to do with virtue signaling by the left, and really it has to do more with electoral politics, because the left fully understands that what they really want here is a full-scale gun confiscation and gun ban, but they're not going to call for it openly because that's politically unpopular. So instead, they just say things like, common sense gun regulation that involves the ban of sale of assault weapons for which there is no evidence. Yes, I'm sure, I definitely believe the Washington Post, which does not believe in the use of biological pronouns when it comes to common sense. I definitely think that those are the masters of common sense over there. Now, the left is not restricting its push merely to the world of politics. They're not merely going after elected officials. After all, they can't convince Mitch McConnell to do anything. He's not subject to the dictates of the Washington Post. He doesn't care what the editors over there say. He cares about his voters. And he cares about voters in other states that are backing senators of whom he is the leader, obviously. But the left has come up with a new strategy. And the new strategy is that you go after the vulnerable underbelly of American culture. And that is corporations. So the left hates corporations. Corporations are evil, the root of all evil, in fact. Corporations are corrupt. Corporations are bad. Corporations are trying to target the poor. CEOs are evil people. But also, corporations are our moral betters who should be cramming down policy on millions of Americans. They should be changing their policies to mirror the policy preferences of the left, not on the basis of an actual boycott, not on the basis of an actual attempt to avoid monetary damage, on the basis of a few blue check marks on Twitter, the editorial board at the Washington Post, and the folks over at MSNBC. The goal is they're going to pressure corporations to do what they can't get done at the government level. So they can't get gun control mandated at point of gun by the government. So instead, what they're going to do is they're going to pressure free market actors to abandon free market principles and start imposing policy preferences from above. Now, listen, that is their prerogative. They're allowed to do it. The First Amendment protects that activity, as it should. And corporations should be allowed to do what they want. They should be allowed to damage their own bottom line if they decide to do so because they're stupid. That's a them problem. And this will open up new market opportunities for gun retailers and ammo retailers who are not Walmart, for example, to simply compete in the industry. And Walmart will lose some money, and they will lose supporters. And over time, people will stop identifying with Walmart. People will stop feeling a brand loyalty to Walmart because they feel that Walmart doesn't have their back and is simply out there to do the bidding of the various editorial writers at newspapers around the United States. Walmart may not see that because they're seeking to avoid short-term damage, but they are actually doing long-term cultural damage because the inevitable byproduct of all of this is going to be the vast segregation of American life into conservative stores and liberal stores, into conservative entertainment and liberal entertainment. We're not going to be able to shop in the same places. We're not going to get the economies of scale. It will raise prices in certain areas, obviously. More importantly, it's going to lead to the self-segregation of the American public along political lines. Now, maybe you don't care about that, but that will have some really significant ramifications for politics particularly, because if you feel like the same people who are trying to prevent you from buying your ammo at Walmart are going to be in charge of the government and are going to come after the ammo in your safe at home, why would you ever want those people in charge of the government? Why wouldn't you see those people as tyrants coming after everything that you love? Why wouldn't you see them as people who want to control every aspect of your life? Because they do want to control every aspect of your life. They're not even relegating their desire for control to the area of government. They're doing it in the culture as well. Well, I promise we will get to the issue of Walmart withdrawing ammo from its shelves at the behest of the woke left. We'll also get to the left attacking Dave Chappelle, the comedian who is not right-wing by any stretch of the imagination, but who also is not entranced with the Wokescolds, and they are not entranced with him anymore either. We'll get to that in just a moment. But first, anytime I see a piece of audio that is labeled Bernie Sanders screams at baby or criticizes baby, I'm in. I mean, we got to play the audio. So Bernie was at some small event in New Hampshire, and a baby started screaming, and Bernie responded to the baby.
It's not easy getting up in front of a TV camera and talking about it. Ryan, did I hear you correctly say that you have to cut your pills in half yourself? Okay. Okay, we can keep that down a little bit. Okay.
If you could stop that baby from being a baby, that would be great. Is abortion still legal? No? That baby's born? Okay. That baby reminds me, I don't know of who. The baby cries a lot, is bald, loves pudding, constantly wants things for free. Why? Wait a second. It's coming to me. By the way, speaking of wanting things for free, so Bernie Sanders got asked on the campaign trail by a Fox News reporter whether he was going to cancel all credit card debt. Now, I'm proud of this question because I first asked it on Twitter when Bernie was first saying, we'll cancel all student tuition. All of it, that will go away. I was like, okay, well, why not just cancel all the credit card debt? We can stop bankruptcy in its track, guys. We'll cancel all the mortgages, all the credit card debt. It won't do it. It'll be just like that series, Mr. Robot, except it'll be a presidential plan from Bernie Sanders. So Bernie gets asked, would you cancel all the credit card debt? Bernie has no good answer because he's a crazed old socialist loon bag from the 1930s.
You're running now in the general election against President Trump and the Republicans, and they're going to say what? Bernie Sanders wants to wipe out college loan debt. He wants to wipe out medical debt.
Yep.
What's next? Are you going to wipe out credit card debt? I mean, how do you push back against that?
I think there's a difference. No, we're not here to talk about, I don't believe we wipe out credit card debt. If somebody comes down, is diagnosed with a serious heart illness, and it happens to people every day, somebody in your family, your mother, your dad, is diagnosed and having to be treated with Alzheimer's, that's an expensive proposition. You go into debt, all right? I think that's a very different thing than saying, somebody wants to buy a fancy house or a fancy car. But I think as a nation, you raised a good question, Paul, and I think we have got to get our priorities right.
Okay, what if somebody wanted to buy a fancy education? Because he wants to relieve all that student loan debt. What a sucker I am. I paid off my own student loan debt in law school. Then I paid off all my wife's student loan debt. We spent hundreds of thousands of dollars paying off the bills that we owed. What a sucker I am. Frankly, I don't understand why Bernie doesn't just come forward with that. I mean, as long as he's promising free stuff, why not just promise that the federal government, under modern monetary theory, will borrow all the money from China and the future to pay off all credit card debt? It's like 0 hour. Everybody just gets zeroed out. Why not do it? I mean, that's what Bernie presumably would like. Why not? By the way, when he says that people are using their credit cards to pay for fancy and expensive stuff, you know who would argue with him is Elizabeth Warren. Elizabeth Warren, many of her early researches pointed out that people were not actually using their credit cards to buy super fancy deluxe items. Many people put their mortgage on their credit card. Many people were putting their car payments on their credit card. Many people were putting food and groceries on their credit card. It seems to me like all of those are more valuable expenses than your higher education in gender studies theory. So I'm still wondering why Bernie wouldn't support the abolition of credit card debt. After all, he's for everything else. By the way, this is the way the Democratic Party runs now. Tonight, they're having this big climate crisis town hall, and they're going to be talking about climate change. Ooh, nothing says stunning, wonderful TV, quite like several hours of climate change talk with Bernie Sanders and Kamala Harris. Can you wait for it? I can wait for it forever. I literally hope that the sun engulfs the earth before I have to watch that thing. But they're having this climate crisis town hall. And what the Democrats are going to do is they're going to get up there and they're just going to outbid each other. It's just going to be like, I'm going to spend $8 trillion on climate change. Nope, I'm going to spend $10 trillion on climate change. I'm going to spend $16 trillion on climate change. It's basically the Democratic Party is a 60-year-old dude attempting to woo a 20-year-old in his convertible after 2 divorces. It's just a bunch of people sitting around past their prime talking about how much money they're going to spend on the hot chick they want to join them for the cash. Because how else to explain why none of these plans make any sense? They don't. Kamala Harris has a new big climate plan. Ooh, are you excited? It will cost $10 trillion. $10 trillion. And she's lowballing it, right? Because Bernie Sanders has promised $16 trillion, which means he cares more. The beautiful thing about being a Democratic Party politician is that all you have to do to show you care is say that you're going to spend a lot of money, other people's money. And I mean, I believe that Bernie Sanders cares the most because he's willing to spend the most money. Kamala Harris only cares $10 trillion worth. Bernie Sanders, that dude cares $16 trillion worth. Her announcement comes one day after 3 other Democratic candidates released climate plans, including Elizabeth Warren. Pete Buttigieg also put out a plan, but nobody paid attention to that because he's done. Joe Biden wants to spend $1.7 trillion, but Bernie Sanders is like, I'm going to go to infinity. Infinity is a number, right? We'll never stop spending money. It will be unbelievable. It's like I live off the teat of the American taxpayer, like a small human who's bald and screams a lot. Wait. Well, you're not doing great in the presidential race when you're downplaying expectations. Whenever you have a candidate who's like, well, I probably won't win here or here, you're like, yeah, you might not win anywhere. Well, now Joe Biden is doing that. According to Fox News, Joe Biden's presidential campaign this week seemed to downplay the importance of winning the typically crucial nominating contests in Iowa and New Hampshire, signaling the Democratic frontrunner's team anticipates a tough battle in those leadoff primary contests. That makes sense. If you look at the Real Clear Politics poll average, even this early, Iowa, it's Biden by 8, but basically Warren is running at 18% and Sanders at 14 and Harris at 14. And there haven't been a lot of polls there lately. New Hampshire, Biden is only up by 2 over Bernie Sanders. So he's probably not going to win either of those states. Or at best, he may pull out New Hampshire, maybe. The campaign still calls Iowa critical. The candidate himself says it holds the key to the kingdom, but a senior Biden official said that the former VP's campaign is already ramping up efforts in Super Tuesday states that vote at the beginning of March and beyond, according to Fox News. Asked specifically about the Iowa caucuses, the campaign official stressed, I think we'll win, but added, do I think it's a must-win? No. The official acknowledged, we know it's going to be a dogfight there. The same thing is true in New Hampshire. But in a possible move to lower expectations in New Hampshire, the Biden campaign pointed to the incredible home field advantage for a Massachusetts candidate or a New Englander for that matter. So that's a reference, obviously, to Vermont and Massachusetts, the homes of Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren, respectively. The campaign said they think there are probably 3 or 4 other candidates in the record-setting field of roughly 20 Democratic presidential contenders who are going to go for a while. They specifically mentioned Sanders, Warren, Kamala Harris, and Cory Booker, and Pete Buttigieg. Well, Buttigieg is just going to continue running because he has nothing better to do. What's he going to do? Go back to South Bend and be mayor? And then not be able to win a Senate seat? And then not be able to win a gubernatorial seat? Basically, this is Pete Buttigieg's moment of glory, and he hopes that one day he will be Secretary of Education in a Biden or Warren administration. Senior officials highlighted the strength of their campaign teams in Iowa and New Hampshire, Nevada, and South Carolina. They're touting their very solid footing in those crucial states. They say they're ramping up for Super Tuesday and beyond. Among the Super Tuesday states are the 2 most populous in the nation, California and Texas. And if Biden underperforms in either of those, he's got a problem. So this is a knife's edge thing for Joe Biden, and he continues to flag, which suggests that the momentum at this point lies with Elizabeth Warren. Okay, meanwhile, the big story of the day continues to be that Walmart will no longer sell certain types of ammunition. In a letter to the Speaker of the House, the Majority Leader, the Minority Leader, and the House Minority Leader, the CEO of Walmart calls on them to regulate guns, and he says that he is going to pledge that his company will no longer distribute certain types of guns and certain types of ammunition. Now, this is a bad thing. It is a bad thing for the country. Why? Because when you have major corporations doing the bidding of a variety of left-wing activist groups, that is bad for the country, because then presumably conservatives will no longer shop in the same places that people on the left do. And if you extend this out, what you will end up with pretty quickly is a situation where conservatives and leftists have completely separate lives in the United States. They don't go to the same schools. They don't shop in the same places. They don't use the same kinds of credit cards. You basically have a 2-track system, voluntary political segregation. That is the predictable effect of what is going on here. And that's pretty bad for the culture, because there was no overwhelming sentiment that Walmart had to pull ammo from its shelves. No one was boycotting Walmart. A few check marks on Twitter and a few columnists for the New York Times were targeting Walmart, and Democratic candidates were targeting Walmart with the threat of regulation. And so they caved. And that's what corporations do. Everybody always says, oh, corporations, they're businesses. That means they're conservative. No. They are profit-seeking. And very often they are short-term profit-seeking. And that means they're risk-averse. And so if the left can be loud and obnoxious, then corporations will cave to them. And that's exactly what happened here. So in this letter, the CEO of Walmart, Doug McMillon, the president and CEO, he said, as Congress returns to session this month, the issue of gun safety is weighing heavily on the minds of many Americans. It certainly is for us at Walmart. Last month in El Paso, Texas, a gunman with an assault-style rifle launched a hate-filled attack in our store, shooting 48 people, resulting in the loss of 22 innocent lives. Now, he still can't define assault-style rifle because no one can, because it doesn't have a definition. Just a few days prior, 2 of our associates were shot and killed by another associate in our store in South Haven, Mississippi. So, that latter case is really not about access to guns, is it, per se? Your own employees shot more of your employees. Our immediate priorities in the aftermath of those tragedies were supporting our associates and the impacted families and cooperating with law enforcement, says the CEO. In parallel, we have been focused on store safety and security. We've also been listening to people inside and outside our company as we think about the role we can play in helping to make the country safer. This is the CEO basically putting his neck out there on the chopping block for the left and saying, I bow before your every whim. Today, we shared several changes we are making at Walmart, says the CEO. We'll discontinue the sale of short barrel rifle ammunition, such as the .223 caliber and the 5.56 caliber that, while commonly used in some hunting rifles, can also be used in large capacity clips on military-style weapons. Okay, well, that makes no sense. Right? You're not selling the magazines, presumably. You're not violating federal law. And just because you could repurpose .223 ammo for use in a large capacity clip seems like a bad reason not to sell it to people who are not misusing it. He says, we'll discontinue the sale of handgun ammo. We'll discontinue handgun sales in Alaska, marking our complete exit from handguns. Is Alaska like a unique place? I'm just confused. He says, we hope you are aware we have previously made decisions to stop selling handguns and military-style rifles, such as the AR-15, to raise the age limit to purchase a firearm or ammo to 21, to require a green light on a background check, while federal law only requires the absence of red light, to videotape the point of sale for firearms, and to only allow certain trained associates to sell firearms. And again, this is all their prerogative. They're a private company. They can do what they want. Is it good for the country that corporations are caving to the few people on the left who seek to pressure them into doing their bidding? No, it's not good. It's bad when it comes to the sale of ammunition. It is bad when it comes to advertising on a wide variety of political programs. It is bad when it comes to general policy. Now, it is one thing. If you can mobilize the country behind a boycott of Walmart, and Walmart responds to that, that's one thing. But if this is just Walmart seeking to avoid a little bit of bad press from hosts at MSNBC that has no impact on their bottom line, then this is just obnoxious cavilling before the quote-unquote powers that be. They're also attempting to ban open carry of firearms into their stores or Sam's Clubs in states where open carry is permitted unless they are authorized law enforcement officers. And they call for gun control. They say, we believe we have been doing our part to make the country safer. And this is their plea to the left. Please leave us alone, guys. Please leave us alone. The prompt response from the left was, screw you. We're not leaving you alone. Kamala Harris says Walmart should do more. Elizabeth Warren says the same. They say Congress and the administration need to do their part as well. There are multiple bills before the House and Senate that address the issue of gun safety and are worth examining. So now Walmart is going to become what? A lobbying organization in favor of gun control? So basically, if you somehow buy off the Wokescold left and join their club, then maybe they'll leave you alone. Well, I have some bad news for Walmart. Left ain't going to leave them alone. You think that Bernie Sanders and the left are going to leave Walmart alone on their pay scale, on their pay structure, on their benefits? You think that Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren aren't going to look to break up companies like Walmart so long as they bow before your whim? Good luck with that. Not going to happen. And here's the thing. Folks on the left would like to see this extended to every area of American life. So you can't even buy your ammo and your food and everything else that you want at Walmart together. Now you have to go to different stores for all of that, or a conservative alternative will begin. Andrew Ross Sorkin, columnist for the New York Times, he openly acknowledges he wants other corporations to start becoming political this way. He says, in his own open letter to Walmart employees, Mr. McMillan, who's the CEO, Doug McMillan, a boyish-looking 52-year-old from Jonesboro, Arkansas with a measured disposition. Oh boy, don't give him too much of a massage there. Said the company would stop selling ammunition used for handguns and military-style weapons, completely end the sale of handguns, and discourage anyone from carrying weapons in his store, even in open carry states. McMillan's move could prove to be a watershed. His decision to engage in a meaningful conversation about responsible gun sales in America could give license to other business leaders to enter the conversation. So a few things. One, you perpetuating a rule that impacts your consumers is not a meaningful conversation. Also, if your call is that all other corporations should simply mirror your political preferences, this is dangerous for the future of the country, guys. Again, it's all legal. Corporations can legally do what they want. Does that mean morally that corporations should now engage in the business of paternalistically deciding what customers should and should not have outside the bounds of what is legal? Of course, that's silly. But that's exactly what Andrew Ross Sorkin is calling for. It's, as I say, the New York Times, Andrew Ross Sorkin pushing openly for credit card companies to get into the business of deciding what you can and cannot spend money on, even within the boundaries of the law. He says, until now, many top executives in corporate America, with some notable exceptions, refused to acknowledge the roles they could play in curbing the epidemic of gun violence. They invariably pointed to politicians in Washington as the ones who were responsible for solving the crisis. Which, presumably, if you're looking for a collective solution, is correct. Because guess what? Let's say that Walmart does everything the left wants. You know what will happen tomorrow? A right-wing version of Walmart will open up and they will sell ammo under the prevailing laws. But that's not what Ross Sorkin wants. He says, for example, Al Kelly, the chief executive of Visa, whose network has been repeatedly used to carry out mass murders. I don't even know what that means. If that means that there are bad people who have used Visa, then I am sure that is true. There are also bad people who have used utilities. Does that mean that your utilities company has facilitated mass murder by providing electricity to somebody who's a bad person? But Ross Sorkin is blaming Visa. He says the chief executive of Visa has ducked any attempt to even discuss what his company could do to help. Mr. Kelly likes to say, as he did earlier this summer, we are in the business of facilitating legal commerce. That is what we do. Our job is not to set or interpret, but to follow the law. That, of course, is true. But that's not what the left wants. The left would like to activate corporations. And here's the thing. It is easier for a small group of motivated leftists to somehow capture the commanding heights of corporate CEOs than it is for them to win elections. It's difficult to pass legislation. It is very easy to bully a corporation into doing what you want by tweeting at them a half dozen times. And so this is what the left is set on doing. And it's gross and it's nasty. And it is going to cause greater cultural rifts. Because the things in America that cause cultural rifts are not just government policy. It is also creating a culture where everything is political. Your Visa card should not be political, and it should not be up to the head of Visa to determine what you can and cannot purchase inside the boundaries of the law. And by the way, if they do that, then conservatives will start their own Visa. Conservatives will start their own Walmart. What you will end up with, as I say, is a dual-track America in which everybody self-segregates politically speaking. And that ain't good for the conversation. It ain't good for the future of a republic. Basically, the private sector ends up as divided as the public sector does, except that you have elections in the public sector, and I guess you just spend your money with the people you agree with in the private sector. Kelly and other chief executives might want to study Mr. McMillan's example, says Andrew Ross Sorkin. He has chosen not to sell certain products even though they are legal. He says critics will argue that Mr. McMillan isn't going far enough. And it is true he could have gone further, for example, by endorsing a ban on assault weapons, rather than simply calling for a congressional debate. Another argument is that Walmart should stop selling guns altogether. But discontinuing all gun sales would only undermine the company's role in helping develop more responsible processes throughout the industry. My open letter to him suggested he continue to sell some guns because it would give him leverage over the system in a way that would be impossible otherwise. He says, hopefully the inspiration isn't confined to politicians or to Mr. McMillan. Which CEO will be next? Well, my hope is that CEOs say no. My hope is that CEOs say, listen, it is not our job to set policy. It is our job to ensure that we follow the law and that you have access to the products that are legal. The fact that all the same people who hate corporations, consider corporations to be evil, want corporations dissolved, say that corporations aren't people, right? You remember that from Citizens United, corporations aren't people? The same people say corporations not only are people, they should be the most moral people and they should set all the standards for our society. It occurs to me that the left is wildly dishonest when it comes to these standards and that they have no standards at all. They simply have desired outcomes, and all they want is those outcomes achieved, no matter the cost to the general culture, society, or social fabric. Well, Dave Chappelle is canceled. I know he still has a career. But here's the thing. The left is very angry at Dave Chappelle. And they're increasingly angry at every comedian who is not Hannah Gadsby, because the chief qualification for being a funny person, according to the left, is being deeply unfunny but woke. That's what they're looking for. Samantha Bee is like the best. Right? Samantha Bee, who has billboards all over Los Angeles that say, because she wants to win some sort of Emmy or something, there are billboards all over Los Angeles that say, get ready to vote for a woman, or get used to voting for a woman, for Samantha Bee, which is not a pitch for your humor. It's a pitch for your sex. She's very bad at her job. Hannah Gadsby, another perfect example. All the reviews of Hannah Gadsby are like, yeah, well, she's deeply unfunny, but isn't that really just us being conceited about our own definition of hilarity? In reality, shouldn't we just redefine humor so that Hannah Gadsby is funny? Sure, she sort of makes you want to bang your head against a wall, but shouldn't we then redefine banging your head against a wall as inherently not painful but humorous? I mean, sure, her humor is the equivalent of having somebody rotate a drill bit in your ear, but Isn't that actually just like you enjoying things? Aren't you just defining humor too narrowly? So this is what they're doing now. So Dave Chappelle has a new special. The special is very funny. There's a lot in there that is funny. Now, a lot of it for me is over the top. The first segment of it, which is him defending Michael Jackson kind of, was too much for me. But there's some other segments that are just as similarly politically incorrect and also extremely funny. He has a whole segment making fun of what he calls Jussie Smollett, that is very funny. He has a section where he talks about abortion that is really politically incorrect. He has a section where he talks about being a gun owner, and another section where he talks about the Wokescolds from what he calls the alphabet people, the LGBTQ left, who seek to destroy people's careers. He's specifically talking about Kevin Hart. All this stuff is the kind of stuff that ticks off the left. So the left does not assess whether it's funny or not because it's not funny. Don't tell jokes. Stop that. Instead, all of their reviews are about why Dave Chappelle is mean. Yeah, comedians are sometimes mean, man. Like, that's the way it works. The question is, are they also funny? Like, I can acknowledge Jon Stewart was a funny person. He also was very mean to pretty much all of my political beliefs, but he's funny. But listen to some of these reviews, okay? Inku Kang, writing for Slate. Dave Chappelle's Sticks and Stones fights for the rights of the already powerful. Now, you may notice that title has nothing to do with whether it's funny or not. You may notice that title is all about Dave Chappelle's politics, but this is exactly the point. In his new Netflix special, Chappelle rushes to the defense of the people who need it most. Celebrities, says Inku Kang. Watching Dave Chappelle's latter-day comedy specials, the most recent of which was released on Monday, is like dropping in on a rascally uncle who doesn't know or doesn't care how much he's disappointing you. Well, he doesn't care how much he's disappointing you. He's worth tens of millions of dollars. He's way funnier than you. And he's the one who gets paid to tell jokes while you get paid minimal amounts of money to write crappy pieces for Slate. So I'm not sure why he should care. Maybe he was a favored relative once, says Inku Kang. The kind of eyebrow-wagging scamp who made the other grown-ups uncomfortable just to entertain you, but also gave you peeks into adult complexity that few others would. He was more clever than anyone you'd met up until that point, and there was something impressive about the lengths he'd go to make you laugh. Then he went away for a long time, and while you changed with the times, he fashioned himself a badge of honor for defiantly not doing so. Now his jokes make you wince. So in other words, all of the old Chappelle fans, they developed as human beings, but Dave Chappelle, he's retrograde. He's stuck in the past. Or alternatively, you've become absolutely insufferable. Maybe over the past few years, you are so insufferable, it's impossible to tell you people a joke. People on the left, impossible. She says, the soundness of their logic is intact as ever, his jokes, but they're seldom informed by facts or new perspectives. Each visit reminds you that your face is technically capable of laughing and cringing at the same time, but it certainly doesn't feel good to do so. Despite it all, Uncle Dave insists it's not his viewpoints that have gotten stale. Everyone's just gotten so much more sensitive. But that's true. Everyone has gotten more sensitive. We live in a stupid, idiotic society in which we pretend that if you call a biological woman she, that this is somehow inherently offensive. We live in a society so ridiculous that we are supposed to pretend that it is more of an intrusion on women's rights to suggest that they not kill babies than to suggest that perhaps Aziz Ansari was not responsible for a Me Too moment after having consensual sex with a person. Yes, you guys got more sensitive. Chappelle is correct. Slate says, in his fifth Netflix special, titled Sticks and Stones, Chappelle rails against the perceived softness of many different groups. Louis C.K.'s victims, Kevin Hart's detractors in the gay community, Michael Jackson survivors, whom he says he doesn't believe anyway. Chappelle also directs his exasperation at his own audience, or at least the kinds of viewers who aren't interested in supporting artists and celebrities responsible for horrendous things. He says, if you do anything wrong in your life and I find out about it, I'm going to try to take everything away from you. You're effing finished. And he says that speaks for the audience. That's true. This person doesn't like it because that's too close to home. And it's not the only review like that. The Ringer has a review that says, Dave Chappelle's provocations have turned predictable. In other words, you liked it when Dave Chappelle seemed to be attacking folks on the right more than folks on the left. But now that Dave Chappelle is attacking the Wokescold culture that destroys careers on a daily basis, now you don't like it anymore. Now you're mad and it's not funny to you. Or maybe you guys have no sense of humor about yourselves because being a Wokescold relies on you being a scold. But being a Wokescold relies on you being humorless and annoying. And that's why comedians are moving away from you. Hell, Sarah Silverman, who's as woke as it's possible to be, is proclaiming that the Wokescolds annoy her now. Welcome to the world where comedians no longer respect you because you're too annoying. You want to generate little right-wingers? This is a pretty easy way to do it, is to continue being so annoying that Dave Chappelle is too terrible for you. You're listening to The Ben Shapiro Show.